Hello, everybody. My name is Tim Greiving. I am a journalist from Los Angeles, and I write about film music. Good to be here. My first time in Belgium. I'm excited to moderate this conversation about collaborative processes and collaborative relationships, which is key to filmmaking, but in this case with musicians and directors and editors. So I want to bring on our distinguished panelists. We have the composer Johnny Jewel. Welcome. Have a seat. Director Fien Troch. And the editor Nico Leunen. Welcome. And before we get into our chat, we're going to start with a clip from the movie Drive, and then we'll talk about why. So, enjoy. That clip makes me homesick for Los Angeles. That's what our life is like all the time there. Music, of course, by Johnny Jewel. But Fien and Nico, I want to start with you because this is where it all starts, the collaboration with Johnny. What did you think when you saw that film? And that scene in particular?
Well, I remember seeing the film in a theater with Fien, and as we do, we speak about the movie afterwards, and sometimes also about the score when it really, really struck us. And I remember even looking at Fien a couple of times during those first 10 minutes, going like, "Are you feeling what I'm feeling?" In the meantime, it's become an iconic part or an iconic scene of contemporary cinema, I think, and it has everything to do with the music. And after the film, I told Fien, like, "Don't you wish we could do something like that, where you have like a really physical reaction to music being used over a long period of time?" And so it became our inspiration for Fien's third film, Kid, that has nothing to do with Drive. It's the opposite of a movie, and the music doesn't sound like Tick of the Clock at all. But if you look at it from a perspective of how we use the music in Kid, it has everything to do with these first 10 minutes. Little did I know that I was at some point going to meet the master himself. That's the flash forward.
We'll get to that. What was the feeling? You said, "Are you feeling what I'm feeling?" But what was the feeling?
I still I feel it actually now. It still has the same effect on me. Like I'm a little bit nervous, and it's not because of the talk, but it's because of the clip. It's because of the track. I'll tell you later when we jump forward what I told Johnny and what his reaction was, because I still think it's pretty funny. But yeah.
Well, let's talk briefly about Drive, just because this is kind of the launching point for this whole thing. But Johnny, this may be a dumb question, but was that piece of music written for that sequence, custom tailored for that sequence?
It was custom tailored, but it was an existing piece of music released on a record I made. The original piece was 16 minutes long, and then Nick and Matt, the editor, Matt Newman, had been experimenting with putting it in this scene. And when I first saw the rough cut of the film, Nick Refn, I was living in Montreal at the time, Nick Refn flew to Montreal to show me the film in person. We rented out a room like this, a Technicolor studio, showed me the scene, asked me what I thought. And my first take on it was, obviously it's incredible, but from a composition standpoint, the immediate challenge I saw was that my original version of the song, it only opens up once and it never closes. So the way that they had in the temp edit use of the track was really awkward because it was kind of like just constantly being restarted. So what I had to do was create a version of the song that would open like a mirror image of itself, that would open and close, so then I could go in and out, like when he's ducking behind cars, things like that, so that we could stay in motion linearly, as opposed to it feeling like a loop. One of the things that's really incredible about the track is that it's done on an analog synthesizer set in random mode. So it's only one note, but it's over 3 octaves, randomly choosing for, in the original track, 16 minutes, randomly choosing sequence of octaves from only a singular note, never repeats. So that is one of the reasons why like Nico has a nervous reaction to it. I feel a little tense from watching. It's a stressful scene. It was stressful to mix. I mixed it from tape because that's the way that the song existed. So I mixed it while watching the scene manually, no computer. I only mixed it once. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack after I finished mixing it because it was going really well. And I was like, oh, I don't want to mess this up, at the very end. And there was so many, I had a little chart written on paper of like every 3 seconds, like what's happening on the scene. Cause like in order to mix, I couldn't really watch a picture that much. I could just glance. But the nature of the piece is it never resolves. So even though it's simple and your brain sort of registers it as a loop, it's not actually a loop. It's constant random generation of a singular note amongst 3 octaves. And also the beat seems very simple, but the beat is also triangular. It's 3 kick drums in a row and a pause, 3 kick drums in a row and a pause. So there's this triangular aspect which causes it to feel balanced, but constantly pushing forward, and as opposed to like a 4-beat cycle, even though it is in 4/4 time. So it is really useful for picture in terms of unfolding in this linear way that holds your attention. Your brain, your logical brain, is waiting for resolution that never comes. So it just keeps you glued to the picture while this really intense scene is happening. And it's the beginning of the film, so there's no, contextually, there's no music before. You have no idea what this movie is going to be about, so.
And our main character isn't saying anything, so.
Right, exactly. So, and that's also part of the synergy of why it works. Is there's everything is hyper minimal, maximal minimal. So it's all those things. It allows the viewer or the listener to just project, which is really effective. It's super engaging, and every time I see it, it's like I'm seeing it for the first time.
I don't want to stay on Drive too long, but Fien, I'm just curious, as a director, watching that scene and how it uses music or how music is used, what was your reaction to that?
Well, I think what Nico said and also what Johnny said is exactly this feeling that I had. Is like you really get stuck into something. You don't want to get out, but you also have no choice to get out. And this constant drive that the music creates. I remember seeing that scene and I thought, or this music, this film and the music will be like the best ever, or it can only go downhill from here. But it's such a, also exactly when I see it now, it's such a powerful, intense thing to start a movie with. So for me, what my biggest thing was the music and the film. They were so perfectly matching that it was one whole. There was no way that I thought of the music separately or that I thought of the images separately. It was just drive.
That's the goal, right?
Exactly.
So from Drive, Ryan Gosling makes his first and only feature film as a director and hires you to write the score, Johnny, right?
Yes.
Had you interacted with him much on Drive, or?
I met him, I was on tour with a couple bands. We were playing in LA. It was 2 weeks before they started shooting, they had got all the locations set, and I met Matt, Ryan, and Nick all at the same time backstage at the show. I had no idea who Ryan was, and everybody was making a big deal about it, you know. But it was very casual, you know, like meeting strangers, you know. I had done some music for Bronson, so there was a little bit of a relationship with Nick, but we hadn't met yet. And we talked about the idea of doing an all electronic score. They were really interested in that. We talked about Tangerine Dream, Goblin, Brian Eno, also the band Suicide, which sort of Martin Rev from Suicide sort of plays a role in Lost River as well. So that's Ryan's favorite band of all time. So we talked about that, and John Carpenter as well, you know. But then I continued on tour and doing my thing, and didn't keep in touch with them while they were shooting at all. And at the time was living in Montreal, so went back to Montreal, was just working. I read the paperback, which was interesting for me because I didn't read the script, and by this time the script had changed maybe 6 times. I read the paperback first, and quite a bit different story, especially the way music is used in the book is a lot of source music, background. It's set Southwestern, similar to Drive, but a lot of the music was what you'd hear on the jukebox in a bar, or like, you know, a lot of like Mexican influence in the music, and not this electronic vision that Ryan and Nick had for it.
I'm just curious how many people have seen Lost River, so if we need to give some context here. Okay, quite a few. Good, you've seen it. I've seen it too. What is it about for those who haven't seen it?
Nico, you want to take this, or you want me to?
Yeah, I'll say what it's about. It's about a mother with a single mother with 2 children who lives in a city that has like a rich past, but it's slowly decaying. Houses are being abandoned. There's no real life anymore, and the only way is out or to stay there and find a way to survive. And her older son survives by stealing metal and selling it to a scrapyard. And she tries to find a job in a local nightclub to pay the rent. And then a lot of crazy stuff happens.
That was an unfair question because it's a hard film to describe, right?
Yeah, but I think that pretty much sums it up, right?
Johnny,
That's a great answer.
It is a great answer, but it's more abstract and poetic and than what that suggests in a way too. It's seems to have a lot going on under the surface and on the surface. And I saw, Johnny, you described it in an interview as dark Goonies.
Yeah, I think I said Twin Peaks Goonies. I did an interview in Prague, but that was before it was shot, or that was, I said that based on the script.
Oh, interesting.
And the movie was called How to Catch a Monster originally. And I had read, Ryan had shared a version of the script with me, and that's what struck me. And that I had said that, and then that kind of like steamrolled, and that a lot of people sort of picked up that paraphrase. And then when I saw the movie, there were elements of that, but I had a different impression of it.
Here I am dragging it back into the conversation.
Yeah, well, it's a colorful phrase.
I think what's also funny to know is that Ryan actually included real people improvising, like almost a Darden line into this fairy tale. Like there's a scene at a gas station where there's an old woman, and she just showed up on the set, and Ryan would have a phrase to the crew, which was like, "Send in the torpedoes," and it was like if random people would show up, he would include them and see what it gave.
Yeah, just start filming.
There is a random quality to the way it kind of unspools. I know it wasn't completely random, but it has that kind of spontaneity feel to it. How early did you start writing music for it?
After I read the script, I sent Ryan. This is before they shot. I sent Ryan a playlist of music to sort of. I like to start really broad, from far out with. As we get into focus, like, are you feeling this type of tonality? So a wide range. I sent him a playlist of maybe 2 hours of music, and then that was the initial thing. He responded to a few things, and then from that point, I began writing for it.
So that playlist was not music you newly created based on the script, or was it?
It was music, because I record every single day, so
Okay.
It was music that hadn't been used for anything. Just I improvise a lot, so I'm not capable of writing music down on sheet music. I don't know how. So in order for me to document ideas, I have to record. So if I'm playing music, I'm recording music. I never play for fun. It's always for the purpose of generating material that I can manipulate. And so I had a bunch of music that I was recording that from reading the script, I thought these were colors for first impressions for me. Like, this is a color that I think could work. So I sent him that stuff, but it wasn't previously released music or anything. But it wasn't made specifically for it. But there's also, his instinct to get me involved, and my instinct even before knowing about the project. I was already working on things. There's a level of serendipity, there's an element of that where I was already working on Lost River before knowing I was working on Lost River. And so there was this natural bridge. And then after he responded to a couple pieces, then I began writing original music for it.
Let's watch the first clip we have from Lost River, and then we can bring you into the timeline of the narrative here. So there's a clip from Lost River. It's a nice cut from him saying head south to a flock of geese flying south, presumably.
Reading my mind, man.
Nice touch. Well, Johnny, first of all, I'm curious, what stage was the film in when you wrote that track, if you remember?
That piece is interesting because it is a combination of 10 different pieces, approximately. Nico, it's the longest connected piece of music in the film. So bits and pieces of their themes sort of arise in there. So it's really a montage musically. This came together in this version pretty late in the game. Trying to figure out how to string these scenes together was really challenging. And this was one of the last pieces made for the score. Something that was really important about it was, and just the movie in general, after reading the script, I like to have a really specific tone or some type of jumping off point for every film. And for this movie, I was really trying to find a unique instrument. It was important that we didn't do things that I'd already done in Drive, I really wanted to use a sound that I hadn't used before. And I experimented with this instrument called the waterphone, which is it's like a hubcap like disc with a funnel cone and surrounded by spokes, like spokes from a bicycle at different heights. You pour water into the center funnel, and when you strike the instrument or bow the instrument, you slosh the water around, and it bends the metallic tone. It has a reverberance that the tone sustains, and that's really present in this. Like all the clanking and the warped metal sound, or the sound of like metal scraping, is all this instrument. It's about this big, and that was really a turning point, introducing the waterphone into the film score. There was the film deals, like as Nico said, with the waters. Parts of the town have been submerged underwater, and then the recurring theme of metal and industrial destruction and decay. So this was a perfect instrument. Earlier in that scene, it's a lot to talk about because it's such a long piece, but earlier in the scene, there's sleigh bells during the pursuit. And that was, Ryan and I had talked specifically about emulating the sound of how it sounds when you walk in the forest. So we wanted this sort of like thing to sound like branches cracking, or brush, like, and that was you and Ryan were over at my house, and we were downstairs in the studio, and outside the studio was another room that had some drums and percussion stuff in there, and Ryan found the sleigh bells and was like hitting a floor tom with the sleigh bells, and he was really excited by that. So after that, we were like, okay, we have to work that into the chase, what we were calling the chase scene.
I also like how you're interacting with the pitch of Matt Smith's yelling, I assume, intentionally.
Yeah, it happens twice. It happens once when the house is being demolished, and then when he's screaming, and that was a really difficult note to hit, to try to figure out how to bookend those and connect those two pieces. Really, really happy with how that turned out, and at the mix stage, I was really adamant about pushing that up in the mix. Normally, I'll take a back seat, but we were really lucky to be working with such a great sound designer, Lon Bender, and we just did this whole baton passing between sound design and score the whole time, and we would just basically bounce it back and forth.
So, Nico, how did you get involved in Lost River?
So Ryan had been editing with somebody for 6 months, and he felt that it might be a dead end. So it frightened him a little bit, and he had a friend who had talked about me, and this friend of his had told him that I could probably or maybe solve the issues with the film. So initially I was going to come on for 3 weeks, and it turned out to be 5 months eventually. I didn't know at all that Johnny was making the music. I just flew in and started working. I was like, where does all this music come from? And he says, like, it's Johnny Jewel. I was like, what? To me, it was like arriving in a candy store when I discovered the bin in Avid with all this music. And I was like, can I really work with all this? Yeah, go ahead, Sure enough, at some point I was going to meet Johnny, and I remember being more nervous to meet Johnny than I was to meet Ryan Gosling. And I immediately told him, like, listen, my wife and I, we really enjoyed the opening sequence for Drive, and it was a huge inspiration, and I think it's amazing how you just used 3 elements to make such an amazing part of music. And it was like, yeah, it's more like 23 elements. And I was like, what? And I don't know if it was 23, but it sounds good. But it's like a whole lot. And that was my introduction into like knowing that whatever I had in that bin was a lot more complex than what it sounded like usually. So it often started a conversation like, Johnny, what is this made of? And like, could we somehow eventually maybe tie this to that? And the answer would always be yes. And that's kind of how this fragment, was built up. When I was doing it in the edit, it was like really rough. You had the clanky sounds, and it was like the theme for the Lost River, for the submerged lake. So it was always really rough, but I could always, know that eventually it was going to be smooth and tight.
Yeah, but I think Nico had the idea originally to have an undercurrent drone type element. It's not just drone, but something that's static, like connective tissue from through this entire section, because like you said, it was really this was here, this was here, this was here. We were hitting all the marks, but there wasn't this like continuous thing linking everything together. And he had taken a drone from another piece and had layered it, which is something that is really cool about working with Nico. Is he'll put multiple pieces of score on top of each other just to see what happens, and try to use. I think a good way to explain it is like if I'm giving him letters of the alphabet, and like each piece of music is a letter, he'll spell words, and that overlapping collaboration is really, really crucial to the projects that we've worked on together, which is for me is really stimulating as a composer to have someone bounce it back to you on top of itself, or like deconstructed or built upon, So sometimes he would ask me for stems. Other times he would just random, or for me it was random or shocking, like layering stuff, which was a really, really cool process.
But you have to trust that he's not going to use those letters to spell a stupid word or an incoherent word.
Yeah, well, that's the choice of the director ultimately, So
Sometimes I do spell idiot.
You talked about the sense of continuity and kind of smoothing it out. Was that the problem with the film before you got there, that did it feel disjointed, or things didn't flow into each other naturally?
No, the film had like massive, like huge narrative and emotional problems. I mean, the narrative wasn't going anywhere, and there was no emotions in the film, in my opinion. Music was in the beginning. Music was the least of my problems, but I was like torn between. I have this candy shop, but I first have to deal with the film. But what I didn't want to do was like, the house is being demolished, put some tension, and then have the music drop out. Oh, he discovers the lake, have some mystery music, drop it out again. Like from when I was working on Lost River, I had the opening sequence of Drive as my source of inspiration. We did it on Kid. So from now on, I was going to use like massive stretches of music,
Right. So that opening clip we just saw really like affected the way you thought about editing, and now you're working with the star of that film and the composer of that track, and you're using it to build a sustained feeling or experience through multiple shots and scenes, right?
Yeah, and in the meantime, I'm calling home and I'm saying like, I can't believe this is happening. Like called Fien is like, who's making the music? So.
Why is that so effective to you? Kind of having a long stretch of music that kind of not blows through, but continues on through, where you might feel these kind of dramatic ups and downs traditionally.
I call it sometimes I call it massaging an audience into a feeling. It's a little bit running ahead of clips that will come, or the clip of Home, but I usually like to start scoring in an unusual moment and like have music come on where you go like, why now? But then have the audience like forget about it. And it's not the case with this clip. This clip, I just thought like all these elements, all these scenes influence one another, and they have a bigger influence on one another if there's like one flow going. And it's exactly why I use the swans and why I use the birds, and to have like a stream of consciousness almost.
Let's set up the next clip from Lost River, which didn't exist when you came on to the project, right?
Is it okay if I say something beforehand?
Oh yeah, please.
So the next clip is what we call the date, and The problem in the film was that those two characters, Saoirse Ronan and Ian Costicker, they, when I saw the film, I told Ryan, so they're brother and sister? He's like, no, they're neighbors. And I completely misunderstood. I thought they were brother and sister, but actually they're each other's love interest. I was like, well, then they need to fall in love. And there wasn't really footage for that, but at some point, Ryan had secretly gone into town and filmed with these two actors, but without a crew, just him and a sound guy. And I discovered that bin of footage, and I plowed through it for like 3 days because it was like massive amount of footage. And I constructed a virtual dialogue between the two characters that didn't exist, but I just used bits and snippets that I found everywhere. But of course I needed something to, tie it together and have it all make sense. And I came across one track and I was like, okay, that music could make me fall in love with somebody. And then I did something that I hardly ever, maybe never do. And that's I completely edited the entire sequence to the track. I didn't do anything to the track. I didn't touch it at all. I just placed it and edited everything in function of that track.
So the music drove the story in that moment.
And that's pretty unique in my world.
Yeah. Let's watch that clip and experience it for ourselves. Now you know the secret behind that sequence. So Ryan was cool with you constructing a new montage out of raw parts like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was more than cool because the ending of the film didn't work at all. In the end, they all drive off, and this basically is announcing the end, where she goes like, "Can you know, what's keeping you here?" And she's hoping that he would say like "you," but he doesn't. But it's all improvisation, so I didn't have a counter shot. So I cut back to the rolling skate ring, and then she answers maybe. So he was like totally over the moon that I was able to cobble something together, and make the ending work because of that. And I was over the moon because I was working to Johnny's. Yes.
You had music that would cast a love spell.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny, do you remember what? I mean, do you remember what inspired that piece in the first place? Since it wasn't obviously constructed for this montage.
Well, Ryan had mentioned to me that he wanted, at some point in the movie, even before this scene was put together, that he needed a love theme. And he even said like, I need like Under Your Spell, but in the world of Lost River. And so I sort of begin to think about, okay, what can I do that's like that, but with no lyrics, because I felt like it was important that there was no lyrics. Also, I'd also like to say that Megan Louise did the vocals for the track. She joins us in the audience today, and she also sang Under Your Spell for Drive. So it was part of Ryan's instinct to capture like that desire type of feeling. And again, the bell tones or the chimes are watery, which was a recurring theme. That was important, that it felt like it fit in the world of Lost River. It needed to be something also that was just really heartbreaking because of the hardships that the characters are facing and all the frustration, the poverty of their situation, but it's something that had a light at the end of the tunnel, something that was optimistic in the end. And so this piece of music just worked perfectly.
And it's such a dark, kind of bleak movie outside of this, right? I mean, I already want to see a clip that hints at that, but so a moment of brightness and hopefulness is a nice respite.
Yeah, there's a bleak overtone. There's this, but it's really colorful, and there's all these really colorful moments that are really interesting, counter to the darkness of the story or the narrative.
Maybe we should. There's 2 more clips from Lost River. If it's okay, if we watch these back to back and then discuss
I think
them.
there's one more.
Just one more.
I think so, right?
I had.
Shall we?
You would know better than me, but
I thought there was one.
Yeah, I think it's just one.
Okay.
Did they grab 2?
do we know?
Well, we'll see.
Just one more. Okay, let's watch this next clip from Lost River, and then we can talk about it.
I'm gonna run off to the bathroom.
You are okay.
Bye,
Great.
Nico.
The theme of this talk is stress, clearly, but so that's a bit of a dance. I mean, literally, there's a dance going on. I mean, did the music precede Ben Mendelsohn's movement at all, or did you have that to work with musically?
On set, he was dancing to Kendrick Lamar.
Okay.
But this piece of music was the first thing that I wrote after reading the script.
Okay.
It's called Shell Game, based on the club that Christina Hendricks' character works at. It's called the Big Bad Wolf in the script, which it's never mentioned in the actual film. But downstairs, there's these, what Ryan was calling the shells, and they're these, in the script, they're horizontal, they're not vertical, but these little coffin-like things where people can go in these private rooms and do whatever, you know, and the person working the club is like safe inside. But Ben Mendelsohn's character is the owner of the Big Bad Wolf, so he has the key. So he's constantly, like, they're struggling between locking and unlocking the shell. This one was really specifically written for the scene based on the script. I was really happy that it landed well. Also, this is the loudest part of the film is the car crash here. And the second loudest part of the film is the music. And at the mix stage, I pushed really, really hard to have this music be as loud as possible, and was very vocal about it. And eventually, when we played back, there were, it wasn't stress tension, but it was like the mixer was like, okay, Johnny, you take the lever and like you show me how loud you want it to be, you know. So then I pushed it up really loud. We played it back, and the whole room rumbled, and the floor was rolling. And we realized, like, while it was playing, there was an earthquake in Los Angeles, and after everyone was really disturbed by that, and then I was like, motherfucker, that's how it's supposed to sound, you know? And we kept it really, really loud, and it's just literally like earth rattling, you know? I'm really happy about this scene. I think it's the only piece of music that was purely written before seeing the film that stayed intact in its original form without being augmented a lot for the film.
Nico, were you responsible for cutting? I mean, obviously cutting, but back and forth between the flaming car and the dance, and like structuring it, and then making the music hold it all together?
Yeah, absolutely. But in a case like that, you know, it was a no-brainer that was going to be the music. But it was, for me, a challenge. But at that point, we were already talking a lot, and I could ask him a lot of questions. But it was not feasible to have him like edit the music and me changing the picture all the time. So I had to help myself a little bit, as I never have worked with a music editor, and I think it's a little cumbersome in my case. So I basically, for something like this, I would lay out the whole thing without music. And then I would choose some key moments where I would like a certain accent to fall or to drop. I would put it there and then stretch the music in both directions, and then, you know, count from 1 to 4 because I'm not a musician, and see, like, does this make sense or is this really awkward? And, you know, like, use all the elements to solve the riddle, and then I'll ask Johnny in this case, like, do you think you can do something with this? But the eventual edit is all Johnny, because I mean, for me, it would totally be impossible to understand all the layers. Sometimes I would get stems, and you might have given like a simplified version, maybe 3 at some point. I don't even remember. But yeah, you have to somehow make a sketch and then present it and see if it makes any sense.
So is Ryan Gosling going to direct another movie?
Last time I asked him is like just before COVID, and I was in LA, so we had dinner, and I said, so when's your next movie? Because I really think he's talented. And he just, oh man, I just got over Lost River 5 minutes ago. He was really shattered by the reactions of international film press at Cannes. It really broke him, and I thought it was so unfair. And when you see how people react to the film nowadays, it's like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And he still doesn't believe it. Like, I keep telling him, but he doesn't believe it.
Well,
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. Well, that leads us to Home. Hi, Fien. Sorry, it's been such a
Hi.
dude party so far.
It's okay.
Home is the film that all the trio worked on. But Fien, when you and Nico were writing the film, conceiving of the film, did you have music in mind? Did you have a composer in mind? Were you thinking about how you might use music?
Well, no, because Home was my third film, my fourth film, sorry. And before that, it was the first time I wrote together with somebody, with Nico. And before that, all of my scripts, my films were very based on an atmosphere, an emotion, and on music. And so, yeah, they were very specific. And so this first time me working together with Nico, it was also the first time me really being more kind of working more on a conventional way on a script. That is to say that Nico was quite, how do you say it? Fierce when it came to me saying no, but it doesn't feel right, or it should be more this feeling, or if we have a scene like that, it's in a stupid house and it shouldn't be in a house. And it was like, who cares? Think about the script, think about what's gonna psychologically gonna happen, the narrative, la la la. So it was really not my comfort. I mean, I was out of my comfort zone, and also music-wise, I was not allowed to think either. I was not allowed to think about that either.
Well,
Don't
even
make it sound no.
No, but not just music. It was photography,
Yeah,
art
anything.
direction.
I had
like
to think about the
nothing.
script,
Yeah.
and it drove me crazy because I was like, yeah, but it would be nice with this, or it would be. So after a few months, I was really drilled, and I knew no, don't think about anything else but the narrative. So the result was that when I had my script, I had no clue who was going to play it, what the photography would be, and what the music would be. And normally that was the 3 things that I would know before I started writing. So I was very confused. And so, yeah, it was also the first time that I had no clue who was going to do the music. And then, I don't know if I can continue then. Anyway, then
Did
I
you just to interject? Did you have an emotion in mind, like an emotional atmosphere in mind?
No, the weird thing, it was really gone because I wrote, of course, it took us 3 years to write the script. I mean, not full time, but kind of, I think, 3 years. So, of course, after 3 years, I accepted that I had it was too early to really think about music. And because I was so into the story at some point, I realized, oh, yeah, it's really important that first the story is good, and then we'll think of all the rest. And then at a certain point, maybe Nico can talk about how we got the music and all that. But just to say that at the point that Nico suggested to work with Johnny, my first reaction was, I was it drove me crazy because it was like working with Johnny Jewel would be like best thing ever. But my other reaction was, Johnny's music for me was related to, for example, Drive, meaning something very, how do you say it in English? Metropole, very I don't know. I couldn't imagine that it would fit my film, and I mean it in a negative way for my films and in a positive way for Johnny's music. But it was like, I don't make my films are not that strong or not that. I don't know. I don't know how to say that it was like the best thing, the best proposal ever, and then at the same time, I was like, it will never fit because I don't have that city feeling in my film or something that I thought that my films didn't have. But then, long story short, from the first track I laid on the film, where Nico showed me, was like, oh, it does fit. It's the best thing that could ever happen to my movie. But that's already fast forward to how we got to your music. And
Nico, why did you think Johnny would be a good choice for Home? And how did you convince him to come score it?
Because Johnny's a good composer, and I experienced that during Lost River. I mean, I'd seen this iconic scene. I had the crazy, fortune to meet him, work with him, and I thought, okay, so if this is possible, anything is possible with this guy. I had the feeling that we had somehow developed like a friendly work relationship, and I had a direct line, but I was also shy. So I was playing bluff a little bit to Fien, like, yeah, he'll do it, like he'll do it. But at the time I was invited to become a member of the Oscar Academy, and I wasn't gonna go. I mean, it's a boring party, basically. It's an honor, but it's a boring party. But I said, like, let's use it as an excuse for me to fly to LA, and then I'll tell Johnny, like, hey, I'm in town, and so I did, and we watched. I told him, like, listen, the first hour of the film is subtitled, and he said, but where are you in the edit? Well, I said, well, I have a rough cut of the entire film, which is like 3 hours, and it's not subtitled. And he said, I don't care. I can watch it without subtitles. So he made some popcorn, and we watched the 3 hours on a laptop, and he was completely zoning into the movie. And what's crazy, he didn't understand a single word, and he understood every single scene. He knew with every single scene what was going on. And I think that's like something I discovered early on, and which is probably the essence of being a good composer. In Lost River, he came up with the best notes for the edit. We haven't talked about that, but I think it's essential. Like, Johnny will, push you to the unsafe choices, push you towards the experiment, push you towards the radical choices. And that's something I highly appreciate in somebody. And so when he watched the 3 hours, he said, yeah, we can do something. And what did you do? Johnny? Do you remember?
Well, let's.
He gave me 358 files.
Oh yeah, that. Well, let's Rashomon this. How do you remember this phone call or text?
I don't remember the initial message, but I remember Nico casually being in LA, and the conversation about the subtitles, and because I think you had mentioned, I can show you like a 30-minute piece that you were also showing it to. Weren't you showing it to someone in the U.S. or no?
Yeah, I think I had 2 meetings.
Yeah.
At 2 production companies.
Right.
Yeah.
So he had this. It's not a sizzle reel, but like this, like a few, like 30 minutes of it, basically. And he's like, I can show you that because Nico's really polite and didn't want to like impose. And I like to see the earlier on I can get in on something, whether it's the script or just an idea. I like to see all the blood and guts of a project, because then I can start thinking about it. And like Nico said, I sent him what was it, 358 tracks. I got an idea, same way when I read the script for Lost River. But since we had already done Lost River, I was more comfortable sending Nico just a mountain of material. And I prefer just really working as far out from a project as possible. I don't necessarily need to begin after picture lock. I'm also not a full-time composer. I only work on projects that I want to work on. I'm a musician who, tours and makes records and things like that. So I have the luxury of really spending a lot of time on a project. So I find it beneficial to work as far back as possible and just slowly bring it into focus over time. There's just so much that happens with improvisation or experimentation that is highly beneficial to the film if you have the time to do it. And I'm down to, like, when I commit to it, I'm down to try it from every angle, with music, without music, counterbalance, on the nose, pop song, score, sound design, whatever, And that was the entryway into Home, which was interesting film because it was, I think Fien can talk about this, but one of the first things that I was told about the film is that it was shot like a documentary, like the Frederick Wiseman high school documentaries. There's an incredible amount of realism to it. There was a dogmatic approach to the cinematography, certain rules that they need to stick to feel like it was not a movie, and that had a major impact on the musical approach because in a documentary style, you don't want to develop these really obvious character themes or strong melodies so much. So the music was used much more subversively in this film than something as colorful as some of the stuff we're seeing from Lost River, because the music needed to serve the purpose of pushing your buttons, manipulating the audience to help convey like what's between the lines, but to not really feel musical always.
You don't want to break the spell of the documentary feeling. In
Right,
other words.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that was something that we're really conscious of, and I think you should talk about the concept of the filming.
The thing is, when you said documentary, I also remember that also became the reason why I was so confused about what to do with the music. So to make it clear, there was nothing more that I wanted to do than to work with Johnny. But at the same time, I made this film that was so documentary style, and I think we're very used with that kind of film that there's or no music, or I don't know what kind of music, I don't know actually, but at least some piano music, and then all of a sudden Nico said, let's just take the chance and try it. And for me it was like, it's not logic, right? And that's what at the end made it so crazy good, that collaboration, because you're so not used to that. And then it's very true that the approach had to be different because of the documentary style, but at the same time I was very surprised how free we could use the music without, at least for me, without thinking, well, the music is too... Never ever there was a song where I thought it's too much, because there was something about the music that you delivered that was so... I don't know, it always was a whole. That's what I said with Drive, and mostly I'm very allergic, that's what you learn in film school. Don't put a sauce on your film. If the film's bad, the music shouldn't cover it up. And in this case, it felt like the music was just part of the film always. There was never a moment where I thought, ooh, but now people will say that music is present. I was like, well, let them say the music is present. It deserves to be present. It has its place there. And it's the first time that I had that with my films. So I can't explain why that was, because the music was just... I mean, the music wasn't even made in the beginning for the film, because it was parts of the 300 and so tracks. But still there was some feel and some energy in it that gave us an enormous freedom just not to be that afraid to think, oh, people might think it's too much. That was never too much. And not only because I was in love with the music, there was something about it that the collaboration between us, but also between the image and the music was very, it always felt natural. Even when it was like, even a song with lyrics in it, we could do it. And that was a party for me during the editing. It was like, wow. It was never like, ooh, we should be careful. So yeah.
Well, we have a lengthy scene, so let's watch that. I say lengthy not to warn you, but because I mean,
It's 15 minutes.
The length is important and connects to these other things we've been talking about. Do you want to set this up at all? Give it some context, or should we just throw them in the deep end?
I'll just say that if you haven't watched Home yet, it's kind of going to be spoiled to a certain degree, but I'll still encourage you to watch it anyhow.
You've been warned. The first section of that sequence, I don't think it's I think it's a compliment in this case to say that the music's almost imperceptible. But as I was rewatching, I was thinking it's kind of an emotional hum. You know, it's not an emotional pulse or a aria or anything. It's a hum. Is that fair? Anyone?
Yeah, I mean it's one melody that comes back twice. One's not distorted and one's distorted, and that's the amazing thing about this music is that it's both like very threatening and at the same time emotional, and that's exactly what we needed. We didn't know. It took us months to find out that that was what we needed for this whole section. And it was all based on Fien pushing in a direction, being not happy with this whole section of the film, not happy. All of a sudden we were like, maybe this is the order of the scenes.
Yeah, but it also came from the fact that we tried to put music, or we're looking for what music we had to put on a murder scene. But the thing is that it was very quickly too, I don't know, it didn't work, or it was too obvious, or it was too how do you say it, to the nose, sorry, to the nose, on the nose. And I think we both realized then the importance of the music is in the build-up to that scene. From the moment you feel this tension, this emotion, why this is going to happen or something is about to happen, and even although the murder scene is horrendous, but even emotionally understand why they get there, that was the key and then concluding that we didn't need music on the murder scene, but that the music that announced the murder scene was much more important.
For the people who haven't seen the movie, when the boy is making love to the girl, it's the one girl he's not supposed to make love to. So you feel it's all like in decline. Everything's leading to something's about to happen.
You link all those scenes with the music, and you wanted to create a sense of something is about to happen with the music?
Yeah. And that's also why it starts again for me when they're doing the washing their clothes, because of course it's very not done to them having a laugh at that point, but it's of course out of nervousness, but also because they're young and they realize what they've done, but they don't realize the impact. They probably believe at that point, if we wash our clothes very well and John hides the body, we'll be fine. And so for me, especially when I saw it back now, it's so important that the music starts back again, because for me it puts an accent on that fact that they start laughing. But of course it's not funny, but they laugh because they're young and they have no clue what they're dealing with. So from the moment the music starts again, it pulls me back into that feeling of before the murder, just young kids who are in very exceptional situations and dealing with things they shouldn't be dealing with.
What is the emotion that second piece of music after the murder, when they're washing their clothes, what is that feeling that you think it gives it?
I think, if I remember right, but I think the most important thing for me, but that even counts maybe for the whole film, is that the film is not about innocence, meaning I'm not trying to justify what they're doing, but at the same time, for me, the film was about how, what I said before, how these kids are at the wrong moment, in the wrong place at the wrong moment, but also how they just deal with basic emotions that everybody deals with, but it's just very, in their case, it's really, really complicated. So what I wanted to do is, after the murder, all of a sudden, it's not that we're looking at a different movie or different character. There's still those same kids from in the beginning of the film, and they might even be as innocent as in the beginning of the film. Life goes on, and important for me was that not all of a sudden it became more tense. The music was more tense or dangerous, or because that's exactly also kind of how the film ends. Enormous things have changed. Sorry, enormous things have changed in their life, but they're still the same kind of. And for me, important in my films is that my characters change, but I never really believe when character change enormously in a film. It was like it's an hour and a half, and all of a sudden they're like different person at the end of the film. They are different, but it's much more, for me it's important that it's subtle, because that's how I experience life too. So for me it was important that not all of a sudden the music became like dramatically different.
I need to add though that after we found, like what we wanted to do before, it was not Fien nor me who came up with the idea for the music on the washing machine. It was Johnny who all of a sudden came up with the idea, and it was like, what? Like that music on that scene? Like it was like, and that's what I mean by him pushing us towards unsafe choices. And when I saw it, it immediately made sense. We had to get used to it, but it was like, that is such a crazy idea. But of course, the scene by itself is already a crazy idea, but Johnny just came up with it, and he said, like, try it. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate. It was really important to me that the murder had no music, just to show the sheer brutality of the moment. It's not a horror film. And the awkwardness, the silence, the shock, that no one knows what to do, it wasn't planned. It's just a culmination, as you watch the film in its entirety, it's a culmination of abuse, bottled up and finally exploding. And it's also, apparently difficult to kill someone, and that awkwardness and not making it into this like cartoonish element, how long it takes, how long were they there, like what's happening, not having any sound so that you can hear the dry paper towels on the blood is just horrific. They don't know what to do. Obviously they're not cleaning it up very well. They're trying to help. And then, so for me, it was really important that there was no music there to sort of like push that along, because the realism was really important. When I saw the laundry room scene, I thought it was really interesting, the comedic note almost, or it was really shocking to me. And it's the only place in the film where I pitched to add music, because usually I'm trying to see if we can remove music and use it more sparingly so that it's more effective when it does enter. But my interpretation of the scene, and one of the themes of the entire film for me, is the bond between the boys and the idea of home and what is home. When you have this like horrible situation with your mother, which is supposed to be home. So I wanted to introduce an almost love theme to illustrate the bond between the boys. So there's this element of naivete. There's an element of love, trust. Also, later in the film, we see that they refuse to tell on each other. So that sort of element of there's a code, and there's a bond that is strong like family, and also the innocence of them not understanding what they're doing. And even though this horrible thing happened, they're still young and they don't realize what's going on, and they're even too young to know how to work the washing machine because mom always does it, which ties again into the idea of the home and the nest and family and all those types of things. So I felt really strongly that this was a moment where we could do something really unexpected, and fortunately they were both really into it, or open to it, even if it was confusing at first.
Well, I know we're out of time, but just want to ask, will the three of you work together again?
We are currently.
Yes, we're working on a new project.
Yes.
Well, there's a tease for you. Thank you all three for contributing to this conversation. Thank you all for
Thank
turning
you for
up
coming.
it.
Thank you
Thank
for
you very
having
much.
us.
Thank you.